Welcome to the Nurture Pod. My name is Iris Sullivan Dare, and I'm here with the beautiful Ginger Edwards. And this is the place where we gather to explore that riparian zone between what is and what is possible as we to the co-creation of a more wonderful place and life and all the stuff.
Beautiful.
Are you
Hi.
hearing those little dings?
No, you hearing
Oh,
dings?
I am, but
Magical fairy bells?
some magical fairy bells.
Ding, 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 ding.
Excellent.
I
All
like it.
right.
I
How
am
are
not
you
hearing those. Those
doing?
are for you. I'm good. Yeah, I've been cleaning out my barn. To tell you
Oh my
that.
gosh. It's
So I am like fully in we decided to record today because this is a big full moon in Aquarius and there's a lot of astrology. So in due accordance with all the retrograde planets, which is like I wrote them down: Mercury, Saturn, Chiron, Neptune, and Pluto all retrograding right now, which is a lot. Um, I'm going back through all my past belongings and specifically the things I've put in jars that I've grown in the
oh,
past and canned. And it's this, I mean, some from 2012. Like
whoa.
yeah, that
Oh my
that
gosh,
apple
I so
butters.
need to do this.
Oh my goodness. It is
I
a wild ride. It's kind of a ride because it's like the sensation of opening them up and like smelling them again. Like it just really goes back to like other parts of my life, like my old
yes.
homestead that was off grid. And I remember making these green beans. I remember doing this relish recipe that nobody liked. And like I still have a can of it in my garden. It's like no one's ever gonna eat it. Just like I'm dumping them all out. They're
Yeah,
really not
totally.
good anymore. But yeah, so that's what I've been doing.
It's
That's
so
my retrograde.
interesting. I have to say that there is a potent symbolism of letting go of canned goods because if anything suggests embedded effort
Right.
like canned goods, they're like concentrated, like all the things. I have so
Hmm.
much. It's so interesting. I think it's this time of year too, but like
Totally.
canning time of year, and like I'm like I actually am like, oh my gosh, um we used to always make corn relish, and it's like all winter, or for we haven't made it for several years, and I've just been like, we absolutely have to make it this year because it's so good, and I totally miss it.
Yep.
But then on the flip side, somebody dropped off a box of apples for us
Mm.
while we were gone and to Corvallis last weekend, and really sweet, really nice. And I realized I'm like, oh, it was a surprise gift, but we did not have the time or the bandwidth to deal with them. And the apples are like going because they're like
Yeah.
those fresh green, like transparencies, and it's like, oh, we got to save some and make some applesauce just to eat now. But it's
Yep.
like, and just thinking about how do we share work? How do we, like, the person
Mm.
that gave them to us, who we love, I'm sure she was like delivering apples like the apple fairy because there are way more
Hmm.
than she could deal with.
Right.
But it's like, but I didn't have to pick up that work. And I was like, I can't feel guilty about those
Oh
not
yeah.
not getting to all of them. I'm not getting to that. And
Hmm.
it's like because there was no agreement. It's
Yep.
not like I said, can you bring me some apples? And then anyway, sorry.
Hmm.
That's a little stream of consciousness, but I think
No, it's great. I mean,
canned goods.
we are in the season of the canned good. Like if you're into this, like this is the moment when everybody's doing it. I wrote a I wrote I read a book. It was a novel. I think it's called Into the Woods or something. Maybe you've read,
Oh,
and it's about these two sisters. And it's like kind of apocalyptic. Have you read this book? Do you know
I
what I'm talking about?
didn't, but somebody really dear to me did, and we and
Yeah,
needed to process it a lot.
yeah, it's a pretty amazing novel, but also like their whole survival like hinges on how many jars, like ball jars they have because they realize that they have to can a certain amount of things to get through the winter, right? So like their whole deal is if we don't have enough jars, then we are so screwed. And so something seed got put in my brain when I read that book and I just started collecting jars. Like I have so many jars. I went into my barn and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna this week. actually I was like, today I'm going to get all my old canned goods. And I started pulling them out. I'm like, oh no, this week I'm going to be doing this because there's no
Oh, so
way I'm
many.
doing this in a day. It was like box after box after box. I mean, oh my God. And I realized like I have really had a seed in me about that was like safety. It was like a safety thing. Like I'll just have so many ball jars in my possession
Well, do
that
you
I'll
feel,
never ever have a fear of not having enough.
I feel like it's interesting for our generation because like I spent so much time with my elders who lived through the Depression
Mhm.
as, farm people. Michigan's not the Dust Bowl, so it's a different experience for like, Joe's
Mhm.
family, but um the like the thing of like when someone passes away, like the canned goods left behind
Oh man.
reality, like that's a whole huge thing that I've dealt with in my life. That also I think like we thought there was going to be nuclear Armageddon.
Yeah.
Like I thought that was
All through the 80s.
all, yeah, for sure. Like
Yep.
from as a child, because
Yep.
like and so I don't know, it's so interesting. It's like it there is this like intense urge to but you were saying the thing, and we were going to talk about astrology,
We'll
but
loop it together.
well, the thing about it's a false sense of security because
Yes.
it's not really about what you have in your cupboard, it's what your neighbors have in their cupboard too.
Yeah. And so I can loop this with the astrology right now because I've been thinking about this a lot as I wash jar after jar and dump jar after jar of rusty old, beans and apple butter and beets. This is like ridiculous. But I do, but I was the farmer too. I also produced that food. So there was like another layer of like, really
Effort.
effort and also like connection with these canned goods. Like I remember them, I remember the recipes, but also there's this idea that I was dumping it out as the jars were being dumped. I was also dumping this old concept that I was very into at one point, and I still see a lot of people being into this. And I think what I realized as I dumped these jars out, like I can't eat all this stuff. Like I made so much of this stuff and it just sat in boxes, and went bad because there is no individual this individualism from the American culture that leaks into sustainability, right? Like we're
Mhm.
supposed to be self-sufficient. We're supposed to like stockpile food, and there's this whole preppers movement and and I just think it's another kind of like little rivulet coming off the capitalist individualist American mindset that we have to unpack because it's really not sustainable. Like this is me storing a bunch of jars of beets in my barn means absolutely nothing if something serious happened. You know what I mean? Like it might be.
Well,
And
right.
also like, it's about community. It's about building systems, like nurture. Like I really like that we talk about culture because it really is about building a culture and systems of regenerative agriculture or community support or awareness or people. I mean, it's great that people preserve food. That's really key, but just that mindset of like, I'm gonna do it. It's just like and it's my job almost to do it. Like
Well,
it's because I took it on like guilt you just said. I did take
yes.
that on. Like I felt guilty about not kind of preserving every single thing, which is why I had a million jars of green beans and there was only like two of us. Like we're not eating a bazillion jars of green beans. I don't even like pickled green beans that much, So I was like, what am I doing? It was all kind of a madness that I'm looking back on now. Because see, some of these are like 12 years old. And
Yeah.
I'm kind of gazing back at my former self, being like, what was that? Because man, I was into it. I was farming, I was canning, and I thought that was the end all game. That was the end game. Like live off grid, grow your own food, can everything. And now I'm kind of questioning that.
Well, and also it indicates that that desire is addressing an inherent thing, which I think is that we can't trust, we have no safety net.
Mm-hmm.
Like at any moment we could be into the woods, right?
Yeah.
So I think that that's part of it. When you were talking, I remembered the story from I think I've talked about my Ed and Ed, my kind of like de facto parent grandparent people that that made the entire difference in my life. And they were relatives. So Ed was the first cousin of one of my grandparents. And that grandparent, home life was pretty rough.
Mm.
And he told me about, and they had 13 kids
Mm.
and not always enough food. And that his mom and the sister of that grandparent, they would bring food over and they had to strategize to do it so that the husband who was abusive didn't know.
Mm.
So like they were strategize of like, oh, when any time they had extra, they would like figure out how to get it over there. And they all lived pretty close together, so they could have just walked.
Mm.
How to get it over there whilst the man of the house was not present,
Mm.
so that their nieces and nephews and their sister and sister-in-law would have what they needed, because
Yeah.
and it's like, I think about that. I have a picture of those three women that I did this whole art project with, and just thinking about what is that? That's like, that feels like, I mean, it's a story of sadness, of patriarchy and abusive marriages and all of that, like for sure. But then the other side of it is being held and having the people have your back.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
those women had her back
Yeah.
for her whole life,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, what is when we have this individualistic society,
Mm-hmm.
we're cultivating resources as an individual. We're not cultivating the community that actually can hold us.
Yeah, and I also think we're not doing some of the deeper work that has to happen at a community level to actually change things. Do you know, I think that if it's just about you and you're, getting what you can do, and I mean, I get that's part of the solution, like you're not part of the problem. I guess that would be
Right.
tied into that. But I also think it kind of weaves into this whole, well, if I recycle and I ride my bike and, it's like, but there's this whole other piece that is about, we have to, like, yeah, it's a cultural shift that we should all be focused on. And somehow it's easier because we have live in this individual mindset to like dovetail that back to like, well, I'm just going to do I'm going to do me. And, and then we kind of miss like the deeper change, the work that has to happen at a cultural level, because if it's not just about me, then it's like, how do I find connections? How do we change food systems? And I know those are bigger problems. So we
Right.
tend to just go back to like, we'll just do me. But I do think that there's like a little like rabbit hole you can kind of go down there, and then it's almost like feminism. We started talking about feminism a little bit like um at one point, and it's like that whole idea. It's like, I'm going to break the glass ceiling. I'm going to get what's mine. I'm going to be successful. It's like, great, but it didn't address like everybody, like the whole idea of like, yeah, you can get yours. Great. That's awesome. You couldn't do that before. But I think now, this is where I'm talking about the astrology again. Like there is this bigger kind of scenario that's playing out that I think now we have to move really like intentionally beyond this kind of
Mm-hmm.
individualistic mindset and really start looking at, it's just the full moon in Aquarius. Aquarius is all about the collective. It's about the big
Mm-hmm.
picture. These not individual solutions that we should be focused on anymore. We need to start, you know,
Well,
really
because
moving this
it
out to like changing like community systems, and we need community and just admitting that we need each other. Like we can't do, it's actually not sustainable. That's what I'm just going to say it. I'm going to say it. This shit is not sustainable. It's only sustainable if you have income coming from somewhere else, because you have, it just needs way more hands, way more time, way more resources. Like this, like growing all your own food and homesteading and stuff. It's a beautiful thing, but it's really an old dream, and I don't think that's where our solutions are coming from in the future. I think we all have to be looking at like, how do we build communities of support and what kinship models, which were there, but now they're not there. So we're in this like
and
weird,
so it's like
no.
it's become invisible, because when the transition from rural to urban happened, people lost their people.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I look at like my grandpa always had a hired man. Like, and
Mm-hmm.
all of my relatives worked on other people's farms as young people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it, and so like this idea of like a couple of people doing a farm
Yeah.
homestead by
Yeah.
themselves, it's completely insane. It's
Yeah.
not, it's because it's never, literally never been a nuclear
No,
family-esque.
it's not what it's supposed to be. It's
It's
never, that's
never.
not, it isn't designed like that. Like
No.
it is absolutely about community and a group effort. And also I'm just like, just take it out there and be like, and healing even. Like we can't, this whole focus on individual healing and self-care and
Yes, yes, yes.
I don't think we can do some of that. Like I said, some of this is good. I'm not like saying throw it all out. We don't have to be into polarity around it. Like this is bad and this is good.
Right, right,
I'm just
right.
saying that we need to move that needle. And when you think about where we want to go, I think we again just moving that needle towards collective group, and it's harder. It is harder because then you have to deal with people. And people have stuff, right? So then it pushes us into doing like the deeper work in community, like grief work and processing and spirituality and all the things are going to come up. But like I do think it's time to start taking on those challenges, especially because we're not really in survival. Let's face it, most of us have enough food. We can access food in this culture. We actually have a dumpsters full of food. Like this is not we're not starving anymore. And so we're spending a lot of time well beyond survival mode. Like now we're just like looking at status. And I mean, we're spending a lot of time, um, yeah, just trying to like, we're turning status into survival. Like we don't need all this stuff. Right. So we could be
Mm.
taking that energy and actually looking at systems. And I think this is what a lot of, I don't know, people of color and queer people, they're saying it's like, we can't just keep going at this like me like there's just and it feels like when I was emptying out these jars and I know all my beautiful intentions and my beautiful farm and my beautiful food, like I'm pouring it all out, but I'm thinking, wow, this was like, why do I have all this? Like I should have given it all away, or you know what I mean? It was just like I just have boxes and
I
boxes
have
because
to say,
and I know why. I was overwhelmed because
yes,
I just had so much going on. I didn't even have the time to hang out with anybody or like even make a care
yes,
basket for anyone. I was just like in it, I'm just like candy apple butter. And then I'm like, oh, I don't know, I just have tons and tons of it because you do when you can, you
right.
end up with way more than you'll ever use. And you get sick of it. Like after 4 cans, you're like, okay, I don't want to eat that anymore. So you end up with these back stocks of rusty jars that go bad. And I just think it's very symbolic at this moment for me.
Yes, yes. Oh my God, it totally. When I was sick in my brain, my memory was really bad. That first summer, I canned jam. Like I would go pick berries and make jam. And then like I got berry, like I just was canning jam like a fiend, but I forgot. And I had it. Sometimes you have the shelf and you can see it, but I had it in the
Yeah.
boxes, which could be an empty jar. And then the next summer, I'm like, oh gosh, the berries are ripe. I got to make some jam. And so then I went and picked a bunch of berries and I made a bunch of jam. And then I went in to go put it away in the little pantry under the stairs. And I realized there was like 100 jars of jam I'd
Yeah.
forgotten about from the year prior because my
A
brain got
hundred
squeegeed.
jars.
100 jars of jam.
That's a lot.
There's so much. I'm like, oh, and I didn't even eat it. I was like,
Right.
it was just, I mean, we ate some, so we must have
Hmm.
eaten like 20 jars, but like,
Hmm.
anyway.
Yeah.
And I was
Yeah.
like, oh my God, I just brought into the scorcher and gave to all my coworkers. I'm like,
Perfect.
take as much jam as you want. It's from last year. It's still good.
Yeah.
Eat it now. Like, but like,
Yeah. The farmer who lives down the road from me, I was riding my bike and we passed each other and he was like, hey, how's it going? And his little kid was in the car. He's like, I just made $40 at the market. And I'm like, oh, that's what were you selling? He's like, 7 or something. And
yeah.
he's like, blackberries. And I'm like, ah, smart. You were selling blackberries. And then I realized they were selling pints of blackberries for $7 a pint. And he was letting his kid take like $1 off each one or something. Like, so he made like 40, they sold 40 pints of them. But I was like, people are paying $7 for they're literally hanging at like just on every
Everywhere.
roadside, everywhere, just like these berries. And so it's just kind of like, oh, well, good for
Well,
you. But
isn't that like the perfect symbol for the myth of scarcity? I
yeah,
don't have time to go for a walk
exactly.
in the high summer and eat berries until I'm sick.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. It
What
is. I don't
is
have time because really, and then I also would argue that that whole individualism, like I'm going to do this whole homestead myself, I'm going to do whatever, even recycle myself, or I'm going to do all my own healing. I'm going to go to, and like I said, there's nothing wrong with it. So don't hear me saying that there's anything wrong with it. But the myth is that there's just time to do any of that. We actually, like we're trying to make this an individual responsibility. Like it's not even practical. Like people don't have time to do all this work and I mean really all by themselves. And
right?
so and then you're like, oh, you're a failure. You're not healing fast enough, or the earth is dying. And if you just recycled more, and if you just rode your bike, it's like, no, man, like these problems are huge. There's massive corporation. I mean, there's giant things going on. And to try to even take that on, like the guilt and the responsibility on, like this is on me, when people are really strapped for time. And this, if there's any survival mode going on, it's time. That's where people feel the survival. Like I don't have enough time
Mm-hmm.
to live the life that I feel like I really want. We're not surviving. Our survival mechanism isn't being triggered by food. It's being triggered by stress, that we don't have enough time to do the things right after we whatever, go to work and do all the bills and deal with the culture we're in. So yeah, I just really have the sense that with this Aquarius full moon, and it's a big disruption. So your Uranus is really playing in this, and Uranus is the planet of disruption, and like it's really far away, right? So it's like bigger cultural like phenomena. It's not usually as personal, but it's like the shakeup. And so I do feel like one of my constructs kind of got shook as I was
Mm.
undoing these jars. I was like unscrewing each one and popping the lids and like pouring them out. And I was like, you know what? I think what I'm doing is retrograding back through a couple layers of beliefs that I've held near and dear to my heart for a long time and operated from, that need to be shook up. Like, I don't think this is the way to do this. I mean, I think, yeah. And I'm not saying I have another answer, but I'm questioning that one.
I love that. This seems like that's the question right now. Like what in my life, what in your life is ready to be composted?
Yep.
And I think the conversations I've been having in the last 3 days with various people have been around this idea of levels of intimacy
Hmm.
and expectation. Um, I've been I've been talking to the people really close to me,
Hmm.
and not about like not questioning those relationships, but looking at some like kind of next level out relationships that are challenging, and realizing like, for instance, what is how I think that there's different levels of community. And maybe this is a conversation for the next podcast, but like that I looking at my own attachment to somehow having one setting for relationships, which is I think how I've kind of operated, and recognizing that there's nothing wrong with having people that you have a different Venn diagram for what level of work that relationship will entail.
Yeah.
And recognizing it's like that's maybe not why they're here this lifetime. And
Exactly.
they're not interested in that or whatever. And I don't know, that sounds all cryptic, but that's what I want to let go of. I want to let go of thinking of my work as somehow helping. I don't know. Yeah.
No, it's good. Keep going. I think you got it.
I think I don't want to be, I want to let go of my like if you want to use nonviolent communication to have an argument with somebody, that if that person has also gone through nonviolent communication training, then you can use that as a tool. Otherwise, for the other person, it just sounds like condescending or emotional manipulation. Regardless of what your intention is, it feels
Mhm.
yucky because you're talking a different language and it's not part of their paradigm. And so
Mhm.
it's like, oh, so I don't get to use that tool really unless I've been endowed with it because I'm being a therapist or I'm
Yeah.
acting as a community mediator. So I've never been a therapist, but I have been a community mediator, and I did get to use those tools with people that didn't know them. and I would
Mhm.
name them. I'm
Yeah.
gonna, and then I was endowed with that. I wasn't that I was there to help, and they
Yeah.
knew that I was there in a professional capacity.
Yeah.
So, you know what I'm saying?
I
And
do, because it's a mutual agreement at that point. Like everybody's agreed that this is what's going on.
yes,
And I can relate to that as a coach because I love coaching because I have this desire in me to have deep conversations and like try to help people and like, work things out. But I was doing that in all my relationships and friendships. And not everybody wants
not everybody wants it.
coaching, or they do want it. And then you end up just de facto coaching them as the relationship. Like I'm just the friend that you go to in an emergency when you need that. And I'm not,
Yes,
I can't go to you because you don't have the
yes,
capacity to hold me. It's just
yes,
I created a bunch of relationships that made me feel good about myself because I was needed and I could be helpful. And oh yeah, so this is we could unpack this one more, but like that is definitely one of mine. And I really enjoy being a coach because people pay me money and we have this very clear agreement that they're coming to me for this and I'm giving them this. And it's just like this is so clear and it feels so clean to me to do that work and it
hmm
fulfills a need of helping. And then I don't need to do it in other places. Like I don't find myself needing to coach or want to be in relationships with people and add that in like as part of the friendship. I'm like, no, we could just hang out. Like this is just me being a friend. And I'm a
yes,
professional coach. So if you want help in this, you know what I mean? It's so smart to understand that, yeah, like people have to come with a desire to want to do the work. And we're not, and we have to also like, we think we're being really helpful, but it is an ego thing. I do believe that we are feeling really good about ourselves because we're like the
oh,
helpful
it's
ones, or it
the
makes us feel like we matter, we belong, we're needed. Like there's a whole bunch of
or
beliefs that
we're gonna diffuse that situation preemptively so
yeah,
that I feel safe, so it's definitely like a
yeah, yeah,
like what is it, Marshall Rosenberg, the tragic expression of unmet need. Those
yeah.
strategies, it's like a
Mhm.
survival strategy, really, I
Yeah,
think.
it's definitely a survival strategy from childhood. Like, I want to control the situation, so I'm going to have these skills that put me more in control. And people who are really highly verbal, we can do that, right? We can create skills that make us feel like, oh, we're being so helpful. But yeah, people, and it is, and I mean, it can be when people agree to it, when people
Yes,
want,
yes,
and
right.
also when people have the capacity, like you said, people have the capacity to do it, because not everybody does, and nor do they want to. And
We
that's
yeah.
totally cool. And then the other piece that we have to kind of understand is that just like the composting, there are times to walk away and let it go. Like not everyone's going to meet you. Not everyone's going to want to, and sometimes they'll meet you in certain conversations and then never again. That's the other tricky thing is that
Right.
it's not a steady stream of like this person's that way. It's like sometimes you'll be able to go there, sometimes you won't. It really like depends on the phase of the moon. I mean, we are all changing all the time. So I think the skill is that's another thing I want to say is like the skill is really to be in the present moment, not to hoard all these canned goods from the past and try to like hold on to it because some of that is symbolic of things, skills and stuff we built from our past. Like it's almost symptomatic of like symptomatic, uh, symbolic.
Symbolic.
Thank you. Problematic and symbol. I don't know what that word was, but I kind of liked it. Um, yeah, it is like it's stuff we carry with us, for survival. And yet it just sits there unless nobody wants it. And also that it's not being like you're not parceling it out because you're also not like tuned into, I don't know, like the I lost my train of thought, but like, you know what I mean? Like it's very symbolic to have this like stuff from our past that we're bringing with us, thinking that it's super helpful and useful. And look at how we did all this, and yet, so what if it just sits in the barn?
I think it's the power is in the exchange. The
Yeah,
power is in being the conduit for the energy moving around,
yeah,
right?
it's the present moment. Like
It's the
you got to
present
be a
moment.
lot. Yeah, it's not about hoarding. If there's any skill that okay, so here it is. Thank you, brain. If there's any skill that we need to develop, it's not about the self-sufficiency of doing it all myself. It is the authenticity of showing up as myself
Mm,
100% and being responsive in a way that, we understand where we are emotionally inside of ourselves and we know what gifts we can offer and and what people can receive in the moment and what we can receive in the moment. That's the skill to cultivate. That's what I feel like is true sustainability. And it's also a great transfer skill to build community, because without it, again, everybody's just bringing their individualism and we're throwing it at each other, being like, no, me, look at me. If we're going to really change a culture, we really have to show up differently.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we have to lose this idea of, oh, yeah, we got to like work on that ego problem, even if it feels like do-gooder ego, you know?
Well, and yes, I think that this is a good place to, yeah, I would reflect back that like it's, I think ego sounds like, I feel like, sorry, I'm trying to like re feel more in alignment with the idea of we're not being fully present if we're using old tools.
Yeah.
Not that old tools are terrible. Like I still, like Joe's just, I can smell it, that he's canning up he's not canning it, he's just putting it in jars, the 15 quarts of sauerkraut right this minute. I can smell it coming up from, and like we eat it all the time like that. It's not, and so like that's an example of like an the metaphor, but it's for real, right? Like there are things that it's worth keeping and going, but being aware of that when it toggles into overwhelm, and you're no longer doing it with intention.
Right. It just feels like obligation. I think we both touched on guilt in there. Like we have to be the ones that, diffuse the conflict or preserve the berries or what, you know what I mean? If it's coming from that, then I think we lose sight of some bigger issues. Like it's not our job to do all of this.
Right.
And if you're sitting out there listening to this and you're one of those people, and you probably are, because it's actually really like heart driven, place. Like it's not, like I said, no way am I saying it's bad to do any of that. I'm just saying that I'm calling out this kind of nuance to it. Whereas if we use it and we slide into that old, like you said, old tool of individualism, and it strips the meaning away from it in terms of how is this actually changing the culture?
And I think it's like if you are in that like autopilot, I have to do this. There's no joy connection to that versus, oh my gosh, look at all these blackberries. I can't wait to make compote. It's gonna be so good on waffles in the winter. And that's true for like 6 or 8 jars, but it's not true when you make 100 jars.
Yeah, I know. But I mean, the principle of the universe is abundance, so it's always going to be like,
also my
jars.
memory, I had no short-term memory that year. So like, for real, like brain damage. So like, it was like, I want to make some more jam. And I totally was super happy. That was absolutely not a hoarding event. Like I just was like, look, there's more berries. Let's make some more. Oh, look, there's apples.
Even as I was like dumping things out, I was like, maybe I should can some tuna. Like ginger. Actually, that'd be good. So yeah, I'm not saying I don't still do it. I'm not saying that you should do it. It's a wonderful thing. But I think that, and this full moon, anything that, from the past that's just been sitting in storage that needs to be composted, this is a good cycle to do that with. And really what it's going to do is it's going to feel like more sticky and more like, ugh, this isn't working. And let that be your clue, because this moon is supposed to have a lot of edges to it. It's like but know that Aquarius wants us, and we're moving this whole, as Pluto moves into Aquarius, it's going to go retrograde again soon. And then we're going to go back into Capricorn for a while. And then it goes fully into Aquarius for like, I don't know, 20 years or something in January. So we're having this whole like review, like as a culture, as a, I don't know, as humanity, it's time to like go back in and what isn't working that we don't want to, bring forward. And so this is the harvest. Yeah. We don't have to harvest everything, and we don't have to can everything. Even if we did harvest, we don't have to save it and put it in a jar and bring it with us. Like it can just be eaten and enjoyed, and like, great.
I had a great interchange with a white crowned sparrow.
Oh.
on a walk, and they were like right. I saw them. I'm like, oh, so I stopped, and they like yanked a salal berry off and threw it on the ground, and then like jumped down and were like kind of working it over, and then they're like, ha, and then like just left it, and then they jumped up and they got another one, and then they started pecking at that one, and then they ate that one. And I think it's like leave what doesn't serve.
Yeah.
Just pick up what makes you feel joyful, just like that
Yeah, and like drop
sparrow.
the
Yeah,
scarcity mindset
there's more
that
berries.
there's always more berries. Yeah, I remember watching a raccoon once in my apple tree take a bite out of every apple and just be like, toss it. I was like, man, he was really like, oh, dude, really? So wasteful. But the thing is, like, this is nature. They understand there's lots of apples in that tree. Okay.
Oh my God, I love you.
I love you too. Happy full moon, everybody.
Happy
Hang
full
on.
moon. Hang on. Yeah.